The invitation arrived 3 days late. It wasn't slipped under my apartment door. It wasn't delivered by courier. I found it inside my mailbox in downtown Seattle, Washington, tucked beneath a stack of unpaid advertisements, as though someone had hoped I would never see it. The envelope was thick, ivory-colored, and sealed with dark green wax bearing the old Blackwood family crest. The moment I broke the seal, a chill ran through me. You are cordially invited to the Centennial Legacy Gala at Blackwood Manor, Newport, Rhode Island. At the bottom was a handwritten note. Your presence is required before midnight. Certain matters concerning the Hawthorne estate can no longer remain hidden. There was no signature, only a single letter. I read it 3 times. Exactly 10 years had passed since I had stepped onto the grounds of Blackwood Manor. 10 years since my mother's funeral. 10 years since my father had looked me in the eye and told me I would never again have a place in that house. Most people know me today as Evelyn Tales. To millions of viewers online, I'm an investigative documentary producer who exposes financial crimes committed by powerful people. But before any of that, I was simply the forgotten daughter of one of New England's wealthiest families. And the truth was, I had never stopped wondering why my mother died. The flight landed in Providence just after sunset. Instead of hiring a limousine, I rented a modest SUV and drove the final stretch myself. Newport looked exactly the way I remembered. Historic mansions overlooked the Atlantic Ocean. Luxury yachts floated quietly inside the harbor. Old churches stood beside streets lined with centuries-old trees. Everything appeared peaceful. Too peaceful. Blackwood Manor sat on nearly 80 acres overlooking the cliffs. The estate looked magnificent beneath the evening sky. Stone towers, iron gates, perfect gardens. To everyone else, it was the home of a respected philanthropist. To me, it was where every nightmare had begun. The security guard studied my invitation before speaking into his radio. They're here, not Miss Tales is here. Just, they're here. The gate slowly opened. I hadn't even crossed the driveway before I realized something was wrong. Every security camera on the property followed my vehicle. Every single one. Someone wasn't welcoming me. Someone was watching me. The ballroom glittered beneath crystal chandeliers. Politicians. Federal judges, university presidents, CEOs, television reporters. Nearly 300 guests filled the enormous hall. Every smile looked expensive. Every handshake looked rehearsed. At the center of it all stood my father, Victor Blackwood, 70 years old, perfect silver hair, immaculate tuxedo, a smile capable of convincing an entire room he was the kindest man alive. He noticed me immediately. For less than a second, his smile disappeared, then it returned, larger than before. Evelyn, his voice echoed warmly across the room. I wasn't sure you'd come. You made sure the invitation arrived late. He chuckled. You always did have an active imagination. I smiled politely. And you always preferred people who believed your lies. Several guests laughed awkwardly, assuming we were joking. We were. My father introduced me to dozens of influential guests, as though we had maintained a loving relationship for years. This is my daughter, the award-winning filmmaker. I'm incredibly proud of her. Every sentence tasted fake. When photographers approached, he placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. The cameras flashed. To everyone else, we looked like the perfect family. The moment the photographers walked away, his expression hardened. You've become difficult. I learned from the best. He leaned closer. I hope you didn't come expecting money. I came looking for answers. His eyes narrowed. You won't find any. Dinner was announced at precisely 7. The seating arrangement surprised me. Instead of placing me near the far end of the ballroom, someone had assigned me directly beside my father. Across from us sat my younger stepsister, Caroline Blackwood. She hadn't spoken to me in almost 8 years. Tonight she smiled as though nothing had ever happened. Evelyn, it's been a long time. It has. I missed you. No, I answered calmly. You missed what I inherited. For the briefest instant, her smile cracked. Course after course arrived. Fresh lobster, prime beef, imported wines, everything looked flawless. Yet something kept bothering me. The staff seemed unusually tense. Several servants avoided making eye contact with my father. One elderly butler accidentally dropped a spoon. Victor didn't yell. He simply looked at him. The old man's face immediately turned pale. That wasn't respect. That was fear. Halfway through dinner, a familiar voice interrupted the conversation. "Ladies and gentlemen," an elderly man stood from the head table. His name was Martin Graves, former federal judge, longtime executor of the Hawthorne estate. He had known my mother since college. "I have one announcement." The ballroom became silent. "As everyone here knows, tomorrow morning marks the 25th anniversary of the Hawthorne Legacy Foundation." Polite applause followed. Martin continued, "Tomorrow morning, one final document will also be opened." My father's fingers froze around his wineglass. The last sealed letter written by Eleanor Hawthorne, my mother's name. The room seemed colder. The letter may significantly alter ownership of several family assets. No one spoke. Victor's jaw tightened. Caroline slowly lowered her fork. I watched both of them carefully. Neither looked surprised. They looked frightened. Dinner ended shortly after 9. Guests wandered toward the gardens overlooking the Atlantic cliffs. A jazz quartet played softly beneath white lights wrapped around ancient oak trees. Everything felt almost magical, until someone brushed past me, an older housekeeper. She never looked directly at me. Instead, she slipped something into my hand, a brass key, barely larger than my thumb. She whispered only 4 words. "Your mother hid everything." Before I could respond, she disappeared into the crowd. The key had an engraved number. I immediately recognized it. 3rd floor, West Wing, room 17. My mother's private reading room. According to my father, it had burned years ago. Apparently, that had been another lie. Rather than returning to the party, I quietly entered the mansion through an old side entrance I remembered from childhood. The corridors looked frozen in time. Portraits covered every wall. Grandfather clocks echoed through empty hallways. The deeper I walked, the quieter everything became. Almost every room had been renovated, except the West Wing. Dust covered the floor. The wallpaper peeled away from the walls. It felt abandoned. Room 317 stood at the very end of the hallway, exactly where I remembered. The brass key fit perfectly. The lock clicked. The heavy wooden door slowly creaked open. A faint scent of lavender drifted into the hallway. My mother had loved lavender. Inside, everything remained untouched. Books still lined the shelves. An antique globe stood beside the fireplace. Her reading chair faced the ocean windows exactly as she had left it. My throat tightened. It felt as though she had simply stepped outside and would return at any moment. Then I noticed something unusual. The fireplace bricks looked different. One brick had tiny scratches around its edges. Someone had removed it before. I knelt down. After several attempts, the brick slid free. Behind it sat a small black steel box. Locked, no label. No markings, only a folded note resting on top, in my mother's handwriting. "Evelyn, if you're reading this, it means I was right to fear the people inside this house." Before I could unfold the rest of the letter, footsteps echoed outside the room. Heavy, slow, deliberate. Someone stopped directly outside the door. Then the doorknob began to turn. The brass doorknob turned slowly. Every instinct told me to run, but there was nowhere to go. I slipped behind the towering oak bookshelf just as the old bedroom door creaked open. A narrow beam of light swept across the room. "Check every corner," a familiar voice ordered. Lucas Mercer. For nearly 20 years, Lucas had been my father's head of security. He had the posture of a Marine, the patience of a hunter, and the loyalty of a man who had forgotten the difference between duty and morality. His flashlight moved across the fireplace. Across my mother's reading chair, across the desk where she had once spent countless evenings writing letters. Then it stopped, right where the loose brick had been. My heartbeat thundered inside my ears. Lucas slowly crouched. He ran his fingers over the mortar. Someone had definitely moved the brick. He reached toward it before he could pull it free. A voice crackled through his radio. "Mr. Mercer, Mr. Blackwood needs you immediately. Ballroom level." Lucas hesitated. He glanced around one last time. "If someone's in here," he muttered to himself, "I'll find them." The door shut behind him. I didn't move for nearly a full minute. Only when I was absolutely certain he was gone did I finally step forward. My hands were shaking. The steel box was still safely inside my jacket. Now it was time to find out why my mother had hidden it. The combination lock had no numbers written anywhere. No clue, no instructions, just 4 tiny rotating dials. I closed my eyes. My mother had always believed memories were stronger than passwords. Birthdays, anniversaries, places. Then it hit me. June 14. The day she used to call our second beginning. The day she legally adopted my middle name after winning a long court battle against my biological father's relatives. I entered the numbers. 0614. Click, the lock released. Inside the box were only 3 items: a worn leather journal, a black USB drive, and a cream-colored envelope marked in elegant handwriting, for Evelyn. Only when you can no longer trust Victor, I carefully unfolded the letter. My mother's handwriting looked exactly as I remembered: strong, neat, confident. My dearest Evelyn, if you are reading this, then everything I feared has finally happened. People will tell you I died because of an unfortunate accident on the coastal highway. Don't believe them. My stomach tightened. For the past 4 years, I have been documenting millions of dollars disappearing from the Hawthorne Foundation. Every trail led back to Victor and several business partners. When I confronted him, he begged me to stay silent. When I refused, the sentence ended abruptly. The rest of the page had been torn away. Someone had deliberately removed it. I stared at the jagged edge. Whoever had found this letter before me hadn't taken the whole thing. They had only removed the part they feared the most. A sudden vibration startled me. My phone, unknown number. I answered immediately. No one spoke, only slow breathing. Then a woman's quiet voice whispered, "You opened the box. Who is this? You don't have much time. How do you know about the box?" "Because Eleanor trusted me." I froze. "You knew my mother. I promised her I would protect you when the time came. Where are you?" "Not over the phone." The line remained silent for another second. "Midnight, the old lighthouse at Brenton Point. Come alone." The call ended. No number, no location trace. Nothing. Outside, the gala continued as though nothing had happened. Champagne glasses clinked. A jazz quartet played near the ocean terrace. Powerful people laughed beneath strings of white lights. No one realized that the foundation of the Blackwood Empire had just begun to crack. I slipped the journal and USB drive into separate pockets. If someone searched me, they wouldn't find everything. As I quietly made my way downstairs, voices echoed through the marble hallway. I stopped behind a stone column. My father stood only 15 feet away. Lucas was beside him. "So?" Victor asked. Lucas shook his head. The room was disturbed. Victor's expression darkened. "Was the compartment opened?" "I can't be certain." Victor lowered his voice. "Then find it. I don't care how. If she has Eleanor's evidence." He never finished the sentence. Instead, he looked directly toward the hallway where I was hiding. For one terrifying second, I thought he had seen me. Then another guest interrupted him with a handshake. I quietly slipped away. The drive to Brenton Point Lighthouse took less than 12 minutes. The Atlantic Ocean crashed violently against the cliffs below. Fog rolled across the coastline, swallowing everything beyond a few yards. Exactly at midnight, an elderly woman stepped from the shadows. She wore a navy raincoat and carried an old lantern. "I wondered if you'd come," she said. "You called me," she nodded. "My name is Margaret Doyle. I worked for your mother for 23 years. I searched her face. Something about her seemed familiar. Then I remembered. When I was little, she used to bake cinnamon bread every Sunday morning. You disappeared after my mother's funeral." "I didn't disappear. I was fired. By Victor." Margaret opened her handbag and removed a faded photograph. It showed my mother standing beside 2 people. One was Margaret, the other, a younger version of Judge Martin Graves. "They were trying to expose him," Margaret said quietly. "Expose who?" "Victor," I frowned. "My father." She looked me straight in the eyes. "The man you call your father." A cold silence settled between us. "What does that mean?" Margaret hesitated. Then she whispered words that shattered everything I believed. Victor Blackwood isn't your biological father. The world seemed to stop moving. The wind, the waves, even my own breathing. That's impossible. He married your mother when you were 4. No, she told everyone he adopted you. Your real father disappeared months before the wedding. I could barely speak. Who was he? Margaret slowly reached into her coat. She handed me another sealed envelope. This is why Elinor hid everything. Your answers are inside. Before I could open it, headlights suddenly appeared through the thick fog. 3 black SUVs raced toward the lighthouse at full speed. Margaret's face turned pale. They found us. How? She looked toward the cliffs. I don't know. The first SUV skidded to a stop. 4 armed security men jumped out. Lucas Mercer stepped from the driver's seat. His voice echoed across the empty coastline. Miss Tales, Mr. Blackwood would like his property returned. I tightened my grip on the envelope. Lucas smiled. You can hand over the evidence, or we can search for it ourselves. The Atlantic wind roared around us. There was nowhere left to run. The ocean roared beneath the cliffs. Lucas Mercer stood 20 feet away with 4 armed security men spread out behind him. Their flashlights cut through the heavy fog, searching every inch of the rocky shoreline. Mr. Blackwood doesn't want to hurt you, Miss Tales, Lucas called out calmly. He only wants the envelope. I almost laughed. If that were true, I shouted back, he wouldn't have sent armed men. Lucas sighed. I was hoping you'd make this easy. Margaret leaned close and whispered, there's an old emergency tunnel beneath the lighthouse. Elinor showed it to me years ago. Without waiting another second, she grabbed my wrist. Run! The instant we turned, Lucas shouted, move. Don't let them get away. Boots pounded across the wet rocks. A gunshot cracked through the night, not aimed at us but into the air. They wanted us alive. That frightened me even more. Margaret pushed open a rusted steel hatch hidden beneath a patch of overgrown grass. We climbed down an iron ladder into complete darkness. The tunnel smelled of saltwater and old stone. Only Margaret's lantern lit the narrow passage. They can't know about this place, I whispered. They don't, she replied. Elinor had it built decades ago during the mansion's renovation. We hurried through the tunnel until we reached a heavy wooden door. On the other side waited an abandoned Coast Guard storage building overlooking the harbor. For the first time that night, we were safe, or so I thought. Margaret handed me the sealed envelope. This is what Victor has been searching for. I carefully broke the seal. Inside were 2 documents. The first was a birth certificate. My hands froze. Father Daniel Tales, not Victor Blackwood. Daniel Tales. The surname I'd always used professionally wasn't something I had invented after leaving home. It had belonged to my real father all along. The second document was even more shocking. A notarized affidavit signed by my mother only 6 weeks before her death. In it she wrote, if anything happens to me, Victor Blackwood must never become legal guardian of Evelyn's inheritance. I believe he has manipulated financial records belonging to the Hawthorne Foundation and has threatened me repeatedly if I refuse to sign additional transfer documents. Attached to the affidavit were copies of bank transfers, millions of dollars. Money had been moved through shell companies in Delaware, Nevada, and the Cayman Islands before ending up inside Victor's struggling real estate empire. My father hadn't just stolen from the foundation, he had stolen from my mother's legacy. We have to go to Judge Graves, I said. Margaret nodded. He already suspects the truth, but suspicion isn't enough. I held up the USB drive. This might be. At dawn we arrived at Judge Martin Graves' private office in downtown Providence, Rhode Island. He looked exhausted, almost as though he had expected us. Without saying a word, I placed the journal, the affidavit, and the USB drive on his desk. Martin slowly picked up the drive. Have you watched it? No. He inserted it into his computer. A single video file appeared. Elinor Final, MP4. None of us spoke. The recording began. My mother appeared on screen. She looked tired, but determined. If you're watching this, she said, then Victor has finally lost control. Tears filled my eyes. I've recorded every illegal transfer. She held up folders identical to the ones lying on Martin's desk. I also recorded every conversation where Victor threatened me. the video changed. Hidden camera footage. Victor's voice echoed clearly. If you refuse to sign, I'll make sure no one believes a word you ever say. Another clip. You'll have an accident before you ruin everything I've built. The room fell completely silent. Martin removed his glasses. His hands were trembling. This changes everything. Within 2 hours, federal authorities were contacted. The FBI's Financial Crimes Division received copies of every file. The Internal Revenue Service opened an emergency investigation. By noon, federal agents were already executing search warrants at Blackwood Development Corporation. News helicopters circled the headquarters. Every major television network interrupted regular programming. Prominent developer under federal investigation. Victor Blackwood's empire was beginning to collapse, but Victor wasn't finished. At 4:30 that afternoon, my phone rang. His name appeared on the screen. For the first time in 10 years, I answered. "You've made a terrible mistake," he said calmly. "No, I finally stopped making them. You think those papers will destroy me? I know they will," he laughed. "You sound just like your mother." For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he quietly said, "You want to know why Daniel Tales disappeared?" My entire body froze. "What did you say? He wasn't the hero your mother pretended he was." "What happened to him?" Victor chuckled softly. "Come back to Blackwood Manor. I'll tell you everything." The line went dead. Judge Graves immediately objected. "It's a trap, I know. Then don't go." I looked at the old photograph of my mother. I've spent 22 years living inside Victor's lies. I'm not walking away now. That evening, Blackwood Manor looked nothing like it had the night before. Police vehicles surrounded the estate. Reporters crowded outside the gates. Federal agents carried boxes of financial records from the mansion. Victor was waiting alone in the mansion's library. No lawyers, no security, no audience. Only us. He poured himself a glass of bourbon. "I suppose congratulations are in order. You poisoned your own life long before I arrived." He smiled. "Your mother always underestimated you." "No, she believed in me." His smile faded. "You want the truth?" "I do." Victor slowly opened a drawer. Instead of a weapon, he removed an old silver pocket watch. Inside was a photograph, my mother, standing beside a smiling young man, Daniel Tales, my real father. "They were planning to leave the country," Victor admitted quietly. "They had already transferred control of the foundation away from me. I couldn't allow that." My breathing became shallow. "So you ruined them." "I protected everything I built. You murdered my mother." Victor looked directly into my eyes. "I never touched her, but I made sure her car never reached Boston." Those words were enough. He had finally confessed. Hidden inside my jacket was a tiny digital recorder. Every word had been captured. At that exact moment, the library doors swung open. Judge Graves stepped inside. Behind him came 2 FBI agents, then 3 state investigators. Victor looked from me to the recorder to the agents. For the first time in his life, he realized there was no escape. One agent stepped forward. "Victor Blackwood, you are under arrest for financial fraud, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and additional charges pending further investigation." The handcuffs clicked around his wrists. He didn't resist. As they led him away, he stopped beside me. "You won." I shook my head. "No, my mother did." 6 months later, the Hawthorne Foundation was fully restored. Every stolen asset that investigators recovered was returned to its rightful accounts. Judge Graves officially resigned after overseeing the transition to a new independent board. Margaret accepted a position as curator of the Hawthorne Historical Library, a place my mother had always dreamed of creating. As for me, I left Rhode Island and settled in Monterey, California, overlooking the Pacific Ocean. I restored a small Victorian home where I transformed one room into my mother's private library, filling it with every book she had ever loved. I also founded the Elinor Hawthorne Center for Financial Justice, providing legal assistance to young adults whose inheritances had been exploited by guardians or trustees. One quiet afternoon, I stood on my porch watching the waves crash against the rocks. For the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying my family's secrets. I was carrying my mother's legacy. People often ask how I defeated someone as powerful as Victor Blackwood. The answer isn't strength. It isn't revenge, it's patience. Because lies can survive for years, but the truth only needs one moment to change everything. And sometimes, the quietest person in the room is the one who has been collecting the evidence all along.